Listen. In the story you are about to witness, the veil between our world and the next is not just thin, it is torn open. I will take you to Klingenberg, Germany, on November 16th, 1975, into the cold, stark room where a young woman named Anneliese Michel fought a war within her own skin. You will hear the voices that spoke through her, names you know from scripture and history: Lucifer, Cain, Nero. You will stand beside Father Moore as he confronts an evil that defies medicine and reason. But the true horror lies not in the demon she faced, but in the choice she made, a truth so devastating it was sealed by a court of law. This is not a tale of fiction. This is a recorded reality. If you have the courage to bear witness, then seal the doors, dim the lights, and join our congregation of the curious by subscribing and tapping the like button. Let it be a small prayer for the souls who wander in the dark. Now, let us begin.
The autumn of 1968 was crisp and gold in Klingenberg on Main, a picturesque town nestled in the heart of Bavaria, Germany. For 16-year-old Anneliese Michel, it was a season of promise. Deeply devout, with a gentle smile and eyes that held a quiet sincerity, she was the picture of a good Catholic daughter. She played the piano, dreamed of becoming a teacher, and held her faith as the central pillar of her existence. Her life was a well-ordered hymn, each verse known, each chorus comforting. The first discordant note came without warning. One afternoon in her classroom, as the teacher droned on about German history, Anneliese's world tilted on its axis. The familiar wooden desk seemed to warp and stretch. A metallic taste like old blood flooded her mouth. Her body went rigid, a sudden violent spasm that threw her from her chair. Her classmates stared, their faces a blur of confusion and fear as her body convulsed on the polished floor. It was over in minutes, but it was the beginning of an end that would take nearly 8 years to arrive. The diagnosis was temporal lobe epilepsy. Doctors at the psychiatric clinic Würzburg prescribed anticonvulsants. For a time, the medical explanation seemed to suffice. It was a neurological storm, a misfiring of synapses, something that could be managed, contained. Anneliese returned to her studies, determined to live a normal life. But a shadow had fallen over her. She began experiencing depressive episodes, a profound sadness that medication couldn't touch. She would walk through the woods for hours, praying her rosary, a growing sense of dread coiling in her stomach. Then came the visions. While praying, she began to see distorted demonic faces, what she called fratzen, leering at her from the corners of her vision. A foul stench like burning feces and decay would fill her nostrils when she was near sacred objects, a crucifix, a vial of holy water, a church. The ordered hymn of her life was becoming a cacophony of terror. By 1973, her condition had deteriorated dramatically. The seizures were more frequent, but something else was happening during them. She would growl, her voice dropping to a guttural register that seemed impossible for her slight frame. She spoke of a suffocating evil,
a presence that told her she was damned. "It's pressing on me," she would whisper to her mother, Anna, her eyes wide with a terror that no medical chart could quantify. "It won't let me pray." The family, deeply embedded in a traditional pre-Vatican II Catholicism, grew desperate and disillusioned with medicine. The pills weren't working. The psychiatric stays only seemed to agitate her further. They saw not a patient, but a soul in peril. They sought help from their local parish, but were turned away multiple times. The modern church was hesitant, skeptical of a phenomenon that seemed to belong to a darker, more superstitious age. Their pleas, however, eventually reached Father Ernst Alt and Father Arnold Renz. For the purposes of our narrative, we will focus on the principal exorcist, a man we will call Father Moore, a composite of the real priests involved. He was an older man, stern but with a history of pastoral care, who had seen things in his long service that defied easy explanation. When he first met Anneliese, he was cautious. He interviewed her for hours, cross-referencing her symptoms with the Rituale Romanum, the official Catholic text on the rite of exorcism. He noted her violent aversion to his crucifix. When he presented it, she recoiled as if struck, her body arching backward. He sprinkled holy water, and she screamed, a raw, piercing shriek that was not her own. "That is not our Anneliese," her father Joseph said, his face pale and drawn. Father Moore became convinced. He saw the classic signs of possession as outlined by the Church, speaking in languages the subject has never learned, knowledge of hidden or distant things, superhuman strength, and a profound hatred of the sacred. After petitioning the Bishop of Würzburg, Joseph Stangl, permission was granted. The bishop's approval was given with a crucial, almost casual instruction. The rite was to be performed in the greatest secrecy. The first session of the Great Exorcism took place on September 24th, 1975. The Michels' small house became a battleground. Anneliese's room was stripped of all but a mattress on the floor. The windows were kept closed. The air grew thick with the smells of incense, sweat, and something else, something acrid and ancient. Father Moore would arm himself with his storm, crucifix, and holy water and begin the rite. Anneliese would be held down by her father and her boyfriend, Peter, a quiet young man who was utterly unprepared for the hell he was about to witness. "In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit," Father Moore would intone in Latin, his voice steady. The response was immediate and violent. Anneliese's body would thrash, her joints seeming to dislocate as she fought with a strength that belied her slight frame. And then the voice would come. It was not one voice, but many, layered and discordant, clawing their way out of her throat. "We are the ones who dwell inside," it would rasp, the words thick and guttural. "You cannot have her, priest." Over the course of more than 67 sessions, many of which were recorded on 42 audio takes, the entities within Anneliese would identify themselves. The recordings are a chilling document of psychological and spiritual torment. On them, you can hear the calm, persistent Latin of the priest clashing with a cacophony of damnation. "Who are you?" Father Moore demanded during one session. The voice, deep and mocking, laughed. "I am the one who was with Cain when he spilled his brother's blood." A different, higher-pitched voice shrieked, "I am Nero! I burned Rome, and I will burn this hall from the inside!" They claimed to be Lucifer, Judas Iscariot, Cain, Nero, Valentin Fleischmann, a disgraced priest from the 16th century, and even Adolf Hitler, who spoke with a clipped, furious rage. They argued among themselves, their voices overlapping in a terrifying chorus. They revealed secrets about Father Moore's own life, small sins from his past that no one could have known. They cursed and blasphemed, the words spilling from Anneliese's lips, her own consciousness seemingly buried beneath the onslaught. Between these episodes, there were moments of lucidity, small, heartbreaking moments where the real Anneliese would surface. "Mama," she would cry, tears streaming down her bruised face. "It hurts. Make it stop." She would apologize profusely for the things she had done, the filth she had eaten, spiders, coal, her own urine, and the violence she had inflicted on her family and herself. She would bang her head against the walls until her face was a mask of blood and bruises. She performed hundreds of genuflections a day, kneeling and rising until her knee ligaments ruptured. Anna and Joseph watched their daughter disintegrate. They were simple people, caught in an impossible situation. Was this sickness? Was this Satan? They clung to the only explanation that made sense to their faith. Their daughter was a chosen soul, an expiatory victim suffering for the sins of the world. Anneliese, in her own lucid moments, came to believe this too. She saw her suffering as a form of martyrdom. She was told by a vision of the Virgin Mary, she claimed, that she had a choice: be freed from the demons immediately, or continue the passion to show the world the reality of demonic influence and save souls. She chose to continue. This was the turning point. This was the moment the path to her death was irrevocably paved. Believing her suffering had a divine purpose, Anneliese began to refuse food. "The demons won't let me eat," she would say. But there was another layer to it. She was fasting, emaciating herself as an act of penance. Her weight plummeted. From a healthy young woman of 150 pounds, she withered to a skeletal 68 pounds. Her teeth were broken from biting the stone floor. Her body was covered in sores and bruises. Pneumonia set in. Father Moore and her parents, blinded by their conviction, saw her physical decay not as a medical emergency, but as the final desperate struggle of the demons being driven out. They believed they were winning. The final exorcism rite was performed on June 30th, 1976. Anneliese was barely conscious. She was burning with fever, dehydrated and septic. Her body was a fragile collection of bones held together by bruised skin. As Father Moore recited the prayers, she looked at him. For a moment, the madness in her eyes cleared. A flicker of the old Anneliese, the girl who loved piano and prayed with sincere hope, returned. Her voice was a dry, rustling whisper, barely audible. Not the voice of Lucifer or Nero. It was her own. "Bitte absolution." Beg for absolution. Then she turned to her mother. "Mutter, ich habe Angst." Mother, I am afraid. Those were her last words. She died in her sleep that night. The story should have ended there, another tragic footnote in the annals of faith and fervor. But it didn't. An anonymous tip led to a police investigation. When the authorities entered the Michel house, they found the emaciated corpse of a young woman who had died a slow, agonizing death. The twist, the final, most profane horror of Anneliese Michel's story, was not delivered by a demon's voice or a priest's prayer. It was delivered by a medical examiner in a cold, sterile autopsy room. The official cause of death was not demonic possession. It was not a spiritual battle lost. It was severe malnutrition and dehydration. Anneliese Michel had, quite simply, starved to death. The legal system, an institution of logic and evidence, was forced to confront a case steeped in medieval faith. In 1978, Anneliese's parents, Anna and Joseph, along with Father Moore and his colleague Father Alt, were put on trial. The charge was not murder. It was negligent homicide. The courtroom became a theater for the 20th century's clash with its own past. The prosecution presented the stark medical facts. Anneliese was suffering from a severe psychiatric disorder and epilepsy. With proper medical care, forced feeding, and psychiatric treatment, she would have lived. They played the tapes, not as evidence of demons, but as evidence of prolonged, horrific abuse. The sounds that had convinced the priests of possession now convinced a jury of criminal neglect. The defense argued that the state had no right to interfere in a matter of faith. They claimed Anneliese was genuinely possessed, and that the exorcism was her only hope. They argued that Anneliese herself had chosen her path, that she had refused food and medical care as part of her willed martyrdom. The verdict was a shocking and painful compromise. The parents and the two priests were found guilty of manslaughter resulting from negligence, but their sentence was suspended. They were given 6 months in jail, suspended, and 3 years of probation. The court acknowledged their faith-based motives, but condemned their actions. They were not evil people. They were, perhaps, something far more tragic. People who loved Anneliese so much they stood by and watched her die, convinced they were saving her soul. The final horror is the ambiguity. Anneliese's grave in Klingenberg became a pilgrimage site for a small group of believers who see her as an unofficial saint who died fighting for humanity. The Church, after the global scandal, quietly revised its exorcism rite, mandating that medical and psychiatric evaluations are essential. The case remains a dark mirror, reflecting whatever beliefs we hold. In it, the faithful see proof of the devil. Psychiatrists see a textbook case of psychosis, and lawyers see a tragic failure of duty of care. But for Anneliese, there is only the silence of the grave. The girl who just wanted to be a teacher died on a soiled mattress, her body broken, not by Satan, but by the convictions of those who loved her most. Her last words were not a triumphant cry of faith, but a frightened whisper. The tapes of the exorcism still exist. You can find them. You can listen to the voices that clawed their way out of that young woman's throat. And so, I leave you with these questions to ponder in the quiet of your own home tonight. Who or what do you think was truly speaking through Anneliese Michel? Was she a martyr who chose her fate to warn the world? Or was she a profoundly ill young woman, a victim of a belief system that failed to protect her? And the most chilling question of all, if you were her parent, listening to those voices, watching your child tear herself apart, what would you have done? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be careful what you listen for in the dark.